There's some really interesting data coming out showing declining usage of ChatGPT and interest level in Bard. So both if you look at Google Trends as well as data coming out of SimilarWeb, which tracks usage across sites, ChatGPT usage seems to be falling from a peak in May, and it had a modest increase from March to April, and then an even less modest increase from April to May. And May to June, we're actually seeing a decline in usage. The question is this driven by educational usage? So a lot of kids were using ChatGPT to write essays and to use it in school, and that seemed to be a primary use case. Or does it speak to a more broad kind of challenge with ChatGPT really disrupting search and disrupting other ways that people are kind of accessing and browsing the internet, that as an interface, maybe it's a little bit too challenged, and it doesn't replace the simple two-word keyword click and click on the result. I'd love your guys' point of view on the product and the experience, as well as why do we think that there's declining usage in ChatGPT?
Well, you had these products launch in a moment where there was in many ways a usage vacuum. What I mean by that is if you look back over like the last 15 or 20 years, there were these waves that would create these layers of innovation that consumers would get infatuated with and try. It came right on the heels of a pretty massive head fake, which was around VR. And that was supposed to be this next big tidal wave of consumer innovation, which turned out to be just a total fart in the wind. And so I think that there was a setup here where consumers were, hankering for something really interesting and unique and new and novel. A lot of people wrapped those labels around the chat versions of these LLMs. And so you had, again, this explosion of usage. But I think what we're going to find there is that there's some pretty useful use cases, but narrow, where these chat interfaces are very useful. And the usage will decay to that number. And that number is probably a fraction of what the peak was. So then people will get disillusioned and the press will say this was, another fad from Silicon Valley. But then I think the reality is that the real stuff, which is around enterprise software, healthcare, the physical sciences, that's where the real AI leaps, I think, will have really momentous value. Those are still 18 to 24 to 36 months away from seeing the light of day in terms of real products that actually work. So, yeah, again, it's part of the hype cycle and we all kind of fell for it. The only winner here is NVIDIA. I think the loser here are most of the VCs who pumped in hundreds of millions to billions of dollars in rando stuff too early. And the consumers, they tried it, they didn't like it, they moved on. They're waiting for the next thing.
Zach's agree, disagree?
Well, I think that's going a little bit too far. I mean, I think that there may be a couple of things going on here. One is that the curiosity factor may have been played out. I mean, the novelty has worn off a little bit. I think there was a lot of people using it initially just to see what it could do and hearing about it and wanting to test it out. So I think people have sort of scratched that itch. Also, school is now out of session. So for all the people who are using it to do some kind of academic research, there's not a need to do that right now. I do agree that the use cases that are most exciting to me are enterprise uses. And I agree with Chamath about that. And I think that is all still to come. I think in terms of the consumer, I don't think it's going away, but I think that they're going to have to improve the accuracy. They're going to have to improve the performance, the speed of it, maybe improve the interface, add some more features if they want to get to the next level of usage.
I mean, think about the product today. 100 million downloads. The whole downtick here is explained by kids being out of school. I mean, it's down 10%, and like kids have to be more than 20% of the usage of this thing.
Totally.
I would think.
Yeah.
So I think you set that aside, but just think about how hard it is to use this product, right? Most people, you have 4 million people paying $20 a month. Could you imagine people paying $20 a month to use Google? Then on top of that, try downloading plugins. It's still a pain in the ass. And if you don't have a plugin, I think there are only 500,000 people using plugin. If you don't have a plugin, you have no new data past 2021. which
Right.
makes it dead on arrival as a product. So I don't even think, I think we're so early in this that to judge the chat interface based upon the product that exists today, I think is a huge mistake. I think that what we're going to see is kids come back to school. You're going to see the normal uptick in traffic. It probably hangs out around this 100 million, 150 million level in terms of usage. I think the next 10x for a chat-based interface, at least insofar as it concerns the consumer, is when we move from information retrieval to action. And you've heard Zuckerberg talk about this on the Lex Friedman podcast. You've heard Meta talk about this outside of that context, and then you've heard Mustafa talk about it from Pi, which is this idea that I say, hey, show me the 5 best hotels in Milan. It shows you 5 hotels, and then you say, book me the Cipriani for these dates, and it actually will book it directly with the hotel, engaging with an agent there. Now, Mustafa from Pi says this is months away. Zuckerberg alludes to the fact that they're going to have action bots on WhatsApp and Instagram in the not too distant future. I think all of the, all the links exist in the world to do this today. So I would say look for that as the next 10x feature for consumer-facing chatbots. And then finally, I'd just say, I was at the Snowflake Summit last week. There were 600 applications, so new startups that applied for their startup contest. They were each using an application of ChatGPT built on top of Snowflake data. 600 new companies, and this is they just launched their application layer. So there's a tremendous appetite for people to help enterprises, right, access that information and build much more seamless discovery on top of it.
I tried to use ChatGPT, the mobile app, on July 4th. I was just trying to find a good quote to use in by like an American patriot or founder, framer of the Constitution, something like that, to tweet out for July 4th, and it just errored out on me. And it was like one of these error messages that you can tell an engineer wrote. It's this totally non-anticipated error. And I tried it like 2 or 3 different ways, a couple of different chat threads, just didn't work. It's completely inexplicable. So when you have those kinds of experiences, it makes you just want to go to Google, which is what I did. I eventually went to Google to find what I was looking for. I thought ChatGPT could do a better job because I thought it could help me find things that would be specifically appropriate for July 4th. So I was curious to see what opinion it might have. But Google is just much more performant. So they have to like work out those kinks. I mean, that's pretty clear.
I think like natural language prediction as a capability is certainly here to stay, along with the agents and the action bots that can integrate behind the scenes to do things for you. The real question for me is this a winning interface? If I think back to user interfaces, user experience in the history of computing, we can kind of go back to the original terminal interface on DOS. And you would, have like lines that you would type, and you would kind of program the computer to do stuff. That was almost like the first real computing interface that people could use. And then there was Windows. And when Windows came along, it was a new type of interface, a new type of interaction model. And then we had the icons that arose with the iPad, iPhone revolution. And obviously the internet, the browser was a new UX. And the browser provided hyperlinks. And in one window, you would click through and go to lots of different things. And then that browser interface eventually integrated images and video. And then the interface that we're almost used to lately, that we all probably spend most of our time on, is the scrolling interface, where there's infinite personalized content created for you, and you just keep scrolling, whether that's on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or what have you. And that's where we spend a lot of our time now. And if you think about the transition, you're getting more for less, meaning you're getting more content, you're getting more output with less input. The challenge with the chat interface is that you're getting almost today, in its current iteration, a little bit less output because it's mostly textual, and it's requiring more input. You're having to write sentences and ask it stuff. And so I think if you think about the evolution of user interfaces in computing, chat as an interface faces quite a bit of friction. The output of it, however, is so compelling in certain use cases, as Chamath points out, that there's certainly going to be places where it's absolutely going to replace the current modality. And then the back end of it can do incredible things that no other computing interface can do, but it needs to have kind of a revision or a rebuild on the front end for it to really work. That's my point of view and how I think about kind of the long trajectory of